I assume that you've heard about the NAR's proposed settlement in the major class action real estate commission lawsuit that they announced on March 15th. If you haven't seen my video to clear the air to show you the actual facts of this proposed settlement, what it was, why it happened, what's the purpose, what are the proposed changes, and what's the current status, what are the changes right now, go ahead and take a look. I'll link that video here that you can check out to learn all of that first before we dive into this topic. But in this video, I wanted to specifically cover what is the short and long-term impact on home sellers. If you're thinking about selling your home, whether that's this year or in the near future, you want to understand what are the potential changes to the way we've been doing real estate business here as a home seller. What are you able to do and what are you not able to do? What are the downstream effects on home sellers, good or bad, that you need to be prepared for if you are planning on selling your home. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here so you can take some screenshots or some notes to make it a little bit easier to follow the facts here, to follow some of the impact that you're going to see potentially as a home seller if this proposed settlement gets approved by the court. So we're going to go over the two main proposed changes of this NAR settlement, that if the court approves the settlement, these changes would go into effect, and we're going to cover how those would potentially impact home sellers. First of all, the buyer agent commission can't be offered in the MLS. That's one of the proposed rule changes. So some of the implications of that are sellers and their agents may have to negotiate commission with buyers and their agents on a case-by-case basis. So as offers come in or as agents who are representing buyers inquire of the listing agent if the sellers are offering any compensation to a buyer's agent to help offset that expense for buyers, that may have to be communicated on a case-by-case basis as needed, as opposed to when the under current practices, the buyer agent commission is offered in the MLS. Right now, that's the way things are done and have been done for decades. There is commission offered to all buyer agent brokers through the MLS in the listing that the agents can see, and they can know before they even show the house what the commission would be if they actually represented a buyer in that transaction. Now it's going to be unknown by the agent. It's going to have to be communicated by the listing agent to potential buyer agents or listing agents to buyers who aren't working with an agent directly on a case-by-case basis. So as a seller, if you've never dealt with the current model, it's not really going to change your experience. It's more of an impact on listing agents than sellers, but it does basically open the negotiation on every single potential offer or buyer or showing whether or not we're going to offer any compensation for a buyer's agent to help offset the buyer's expenses. The buyer agent commission may be a key term for sellers to consider, especially in multiple offer situations. So if you've been in a multiple offer situation before, whether as a buyer or a seller, you know that it gets very competitive. There's many terms and conditions to consider. Obviously, the most important thing is price, but a lot of times closing costs covered by the seller or other concessions are a sticking point in negotiations. Well, now we would add to that buyer agent commission. So the compensation of the buyer agent would be on the table as well as a main term for negotiations. Now, sellers may get a higher net sale, which is what most people are thinking of if they're selling a home and they're excited about potentially this change in how real estate agent commissions are paid and are charged. They've heard headlines that, the 6% commission is gone forever, things like that. First of all, there never really was a set price. 6% was pretty common if you add both the listing and seller side for most agents to charge, but it's always negotiable. Even though some agents may not negotiate, if you meet with enough agents, you'll find somebody who's offering a better deal potentially, or just different services. Everything is negotiable in terms of pricing and services, always has been. But yes, the average overall, I would say the most common rate has been 6%. So again, it's a fallacy that there's a 6% commission that is fixed, and it's also a fallacy that that's actually going away. Everything's going to be negotiable as it always has been. Not being able to offer the buyer agent commission in the MLS is going to change the way we do business in this way as well. In terms of the sellers can get a higher net sale. It's not guaranteed. That's what a lot of people are missing here, is that they think this proposed change automatically gives sellers 3% off their commission, basically cutting what they would owe in half, but it's just negotiable. So if they and their agents negotiate a lower buyer agent commission, they might get a higher net sale, or if they and their agents convince buyers to pay some or all of the buyer agent commission, they may have a higher net sale. Or if they end up selling to buyers who are not using an agent, and therefore there's no buyer agent commission to pay. So those are a few scenarios where a seller may get a higher net sale. Another implication here is that listings may get less market exposure. So I don't want you to miss this one, especially if you're a seller watching this. This is one that a lot of people aren't thinking about, just because you don't think about some of the unintended consequences usually. We're just thinking about being excited about saving money on commissions. But these are a few different implications here regarding getting less market exposure. First of all, if some buyer agents leave the profession, or fewer agents pursue buyer representation, both of which I think is going to happen at least in the long term, if not in some of the short term, due to uncertainty regarding compensation. So just to translate more simply, if a buyer agent or an agent is used to working with buyers, rather, they may not be inclined to do that anymore, especially if they were more of a part-time agent or they just helped friends and family. Buyers are going to have to actually have their agents pay them directly, potentially. That's going to make it a more awkward situation, or just a more difficult ask for the agent to help their friend or family member to find a home. Right now, they can help them and not really talk about money, and they can get paid through the listing agent. So that's an easier in for most agents, just to have friends and family that they can work with and represent them. Doesn't mean they're not doing a good job. It just means that they don't have to actually negotiate on the financial standpoint and actually charge their clients. So this is going to be a change that might push some agents out of the business. There also might be fewer agents that pursue representing buyers. Maybe they do work with buyers, of course, when it comes up, but they may not pursue that as their first priority because the compensation is uncertain. It's going to be on a case-by-case basis. As we said, we don't really know as a buyer's agent how much we're going to get paid in the future if this goes through, if this settlement is approved by the court and these changes take effect. I think even more likely, if some sellers choose to not offer to share the expense of the buyer agent commission. So if the sellers do look at those headlines and say, hey, I don't have to pay this anymore, so I'm not going to, there are implications to that. You can get less exposure because some of these buyers, as their agent or they inquire directly, is this listing offering help with the buyer agent commission? Are they willing to share that expense? They're going to find that out before they write an offer, for sure, maybe even before they schedule a showing. And they'll find out if those sellers aren't offering help with that expense, then some buyers will choose not to view their listings. That is certainly their choice. We don't, as an agent, as a buyer's agent, obviously you don't want to make that choice because that would be considered steering your clients, which is illegal, to the listings that pay more. But if a buyer, even if they ask their buyer's agent to help them get this information, the buyer is allowed to decide not to look at a listing because it actually changes their expenses. They may not have a down payment plus closing costs plus the expense of compensating their buyer agent. And they may not want to get rid of their buyer agent because they may value their professional guidance throughout the process, and they don't want to buy a house without that. So I think that's pretty likely to happen. We don't know to what extent or how pervasive that change is going to be. I think initially there's going to be, in the short term, probably more sellers doing this than will later on, because I think some sellers will realize that they will have less market exposure if they don't offer any commission to the buyer agents. I'm totally free market on this, in case you're wondering my opinion on this. I think it's totally fine if one of my seller clients wants to not offer any buyer agent commission, and let's see how it goes. And if it ends up not working out very well with limited market exposure, then we can always change that later and offer that. It just would take the time, on the market to figure that out. So now, of course, with less market exposure, that may result in a lower sale price. So if there's fewer buyers looking at the house, there's fewer offers. That means probably a lower sale price, maybe even less favorable terms, and a longer time on the market. So fewer showings, fewer offers, or them happening less often means it may take a longer time to sell the house, longer time on the market, which translates to higher holding costs and other expenses to maintain the home and utilities. But also, even if you're living in there and you're not worried about holding costs, just the stress of having to show the house over a longer period of time and having some of your plans change if you have your next place lined up, and you end up having to be on the market for longer than you expected. So again, that's due to fewer showings and fewer offers, potentially as a result of getting less market exposure for these reasons. Now, the second potential change here that is proposed in this settlement is buyers and their agents must sign a written agreement before starting the home buying process. Now, of course, this impacts buyers and their agents more than it does sellers and listing agents. So I would say there's really no significant impact on sellers. However, there may be more buyers as a result of this who choose to not use an agent because they might not be comfortable signing a written agreement before starting the home buying process, before getting to know that agent. They may not want to sign an exclusive agreement, exclusive right to represent them as a buyer with an agent. Some buyers just aren't going to be comfortable doing that, and they never will be. So they will represent themselves or not use an agent, which as a seller doesn't sound like that's going to really hurt you at all, because you would be able to save that buyer agent commission. So in that case, if they bought your house and it was a good offer, you would save that portion of the commission. You wouldn't have to pay the buyer agent. But transactions with unrepresented buyers do have a greater risk of not closing due to a lack of professional guidance. I don't believe this is my opinion. I think this is a fact. I've seen it many times, and any professional will tell you the same thing. It doesn't mean unrepresented buyers can't figure out how to close the deal. That's not the case. But there is a higher percentage of those transactions with unrepresented buyers terminating due to some issue with negotiations on inspection or with appraisal or with the financing not going through or something like that. Generally speaking, part of the value that buyer agents offer is to help make sure that the transaction actually gets to closing, prevent some of the problems that come up with those contingencies like inspection, appraisal, and financing, making sure the buyer is prepared for all of those expenses, making sure they're walking them through the entire process, hitting all the deadlines, and that they don't get spooked after they see the inspection report and see all these issues that are on there. The buyer agent provides a lot of valuable perspective to the buyers throughout the process to try to keep their eyes on the prize, keep them focused on what their goal is, which is to buy this house that they fell in love with, and not get sidetracked with all these negotiations and all the emotions that come up through the process when issues come up that we have to, obstacles that we have to overcome and issues we have to resolve. So these are the implications of the potential changes of the NAR settlement. Again, if and when the court approves this settlement, these changes would go into effect possibly as early as July of 2024. I think the main headline here is that sellers are hearing, especially through local news, the misinformation that all of a sudden the commissions are changed forever and they don't have to pay a buyer's agent, and that's just going away and they're going to save half of the commission that they normally owe. So we've already highlighted here, so I won't do it again, the situation in which you actually can save money as a seller, but it's not a guarantee. And there are some negative impacts as well, potentially, as we went over here with these changes going into effect for sellers, which a lot of local news and even national news are not really covering. So as you can see, as we peel back the curtain, at least at first glance, it seems like sellers are going to win, like they're going to have to pay less commission. They're going to save money and net more money when they sell their homes if these proposed changes go into effect. But you can actually see some of the negative impact on sellers as well. So maybe they won't actually save money. Maybe they'll sell for less. Maybe it'll take longer for them to sell. We don't really know exactly what's going to happen, but these are some potential issues as well. If you have any questions, if you're thinking about selling your home in the near future and you want to get some questions answered, you want to see what it looks like, the whole process in light of these proposed changes, feel free to reach out. The best way to reach out to me is to visit my website at 513flatfee.com. Click the link there to schedule a call so we can set aside some time dedicated to assessing your needs, answering your questions, and I can map out a game plan for how I can help you to achieve your real estate goals. I'm Patrick Grosser with the 513 Flat Fee Real Estate Group at Fathom Realty.